Center Region Parks and Recreation manages 56 municipal and regional parks. These beautiful parks offer amenities such as sports fields, rentable picnic pavilions, playgrounds, bike and walking trails, and recreation facilities. Take some time to find your park and spend some time outdoors. Visit crpr.org for a list of park locations and amenities.
You're watching CNET, Center County's Government and Educational Access Network.
I'd like to call to order the September 19th, 2022 regular board meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. If everyone could please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone who is here with us in person this evening, and also those who are viewing remotely this evening. Okay, I'd like to announce that the board held an executive session on August 29th regarding personnel, legal, negotiations, real estate, and safety. Board members with an agenda before you, are there any changes to the agenda? So at this time, Mr. Johnson will now review some of the housekeeping related to our hybrid format.
Thank you, Amber. For our audience this evening, 30 minutes will be provided at the beginning of the meeting for public comment for items related to the board business that are not on the action items portion of the agenda. If additional time is necessary, the board may consider reopening public comment after board business is completed or during the next meeting. Each individual will be limited to comments of up to 3 minutes as time permits for items related to the board business that are not on the action items portion of the agenda. For action items, public comment will be held just prior to voting on that item as required by school code. This approach also allows for comments to be informed by the presentation and the board's discussions of the respective item. Since this is a public meeting, we will not permit remarks regarding individual students. If you'd like to share something with our board about individual students, please email them. During the meeting, the IT help desk is available for those viewing remotely and encounter technical difficulties. You may email itsupport@scasd.org or call 814-231-7743.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnson. At this time, I'll call on our board secretary for a roll call of board members present.
Dr. Anderson.
Here.
Dr. Bader.
Here.
Ms. Brandt.
Here.
Dr. Buck.
Here.
Ms. Concepcion.
Here.
Dr. Crevecoeur.
I'm not sure that
Carlene?
she logged in. She is logged in.
She's logged in online.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Duffy.
Here.
Ms. Huff.
Here.
Ms. Zidney.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we'll have the superintendent's update. Mr. Johnson?
All right, I have a few updates. Congratulations to our students who showed livestock at the recent Grange Fair. Many placed highly in their respective events, the results of the months of hard work. Nice job, everyone. We are again partnering with Center Volunteers in Medicine to hold clinics for COVID vaccine boosters and full vaccinations. Clinics will take place on September 22nd, September 28th, and October 5th from 1 to 6 p.m. in the North Building Gym, and will be open to individuals ages 12 and over. The new Pfizer booster to help protect against Omicron variants will be available. You can sign up on the CVIM website. And last week I met with all the local police chiefs regarding police presence in our elementary schools. As always, SROs are allowed to conduct duties freely throughout all our buildings. Moving forward, all other police officers will check in with a building principal prior to doing any routine building walkthroughs or safety checks. Our goal is to have principals working collaboratively with these officers.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any questions from the board? Okay, thanks. And thank you for getting the vaccine clinic set up again. That's really helpful for the community. Okay, let me make sure. Yes, we do have Isabella Caceres is our student representative for the first marking period, and she's online. So welcome, Isabella. And anytime that you would like to make a comment or ask a question, please just feel free to raise your hand. So good to have you with us. Thanks. Okay, Jackie, do you have any legislative report for us?
So I just wanted to report that Governor Wolf has announced that school breakfast will be free for all children beginning October 1st. We know it's been a lot of back and forth with it was all free and then it wasn't all free, and now we're going back to free lunch for students. But we really appreciate all the work Megan Shaper does to help facilitate all that, and it's free breakfast for kids, so that's great.
Yep.
In terms of the state legislature, they are back in session, but right now don't really have anything education related on their agenda before the election.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Peter, do you have the COG update?
I do. Thank you. Last week, the Center Region Park and Rec Authority hosted a work session regarding a proposed master plan, the master plan for Hess Field. The staff prefers a plan that would have 3 softball fields, not 4. Later that day, there was a regular meeting where changes regarding contracts in Millbrook Marsh Nature Center construction, gift trees and benches and the fee schedule for that, and a project manager RFP request for proposals, for Whitehall Road Regional Park and Millbrook Marsh Nature Center, just because of some changes in that. There was nothing regarding interruption to any of those facilities, by the way. On August 8th, the Climate Action and Sustainability Committee voted to have the Sustainability Planner coordinate with other communities to share energy data for communities with climate action and adaptation plans. The Center region is one of those in Pennsylvania. They are also reviewing the schedule for the refuse and recycling contracts, which everyone pay attention. And they are also looking to host climate change discussions across the region. And then finally, the COG General Forum will be held next Monday, September 26th. I guess the last thing is that I think that we had announced that this was going to happen. The solar power purchase agreement request for proposals was released. Mm-hmm. So it is out there, and we will see over the coming months what comes in.
Great.
That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Okay, at this time, we have time on our agenda for public comment. Each individual is limited to comments of up to 3 minutes as time permits for items related to board business that are not on the action items portion of the agenda. For action items, public comment will be held just prior to voting on that item as required by school code. So as a reminder, the public comment is a chance for community members to share their thoughts with the board. It is not a time for the board to answer questions or engage in conversations. But you can always email the board at all-board@scasd.org, and we'll be happy to answer questions or hear from you that way as well. So if anyone is here to make a public comment for an item not on the action items portion of the agenda, you can come up to the lectern here. Okay, yes. If you'd like to come up to the microphone here, and if you could introduce yourself and where you reside in the district, and then you'll have 3 minutes for comments.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for your service to all the board members. My name is Dick Anderson. I've lived in State College for 44 years. My 4 children have all gone through the system, and I have currently 3 grandchildren in the system, so I do have some comments and concerns. The State College School District facilities are among the very best, and I believe we have an outstanding faculty, administration, and coaches to go with it. We've provided educational and extracurricular activities that will help develop well-rounded students. We have 60% of our student body involved in athletics, 80 to 90 clubs. All of this helps to create a student body that demonstrates enthusiasm, unity, school spirit, and the willingness to help one another. This does not mean, however, that there aren't problems. Problems can be solved with strong leadership and transparency that comes from the board, administration, faculty, and coaches. Our goal should be to help every student reach their full potential. Title IX was born in 1972. It opened the door for women to compete in athletics and was a great leap forward for the rights of females. I do not want to see this progress diminished in any way by allowing biological males to compete with females. The PIAA has created a formula to allow this. This can be overcome if there's a will, thoughtful planning, and cooperation with other districts. Sexual orientation belongs in the hands of parents, not in the classroom, of impressionable students that can be easily manipulated and influenced. Pronoun teaching is part of this. CRT, critical race training, by its very nature is divisive. It creates oppressors, victims, with shaming in the process. No one should want students looking at one another through the lens of race. I hope it doesn't exist here. Drug and alcohol education should be ongoing throughout the school system. The crisis on our border has increased the drug trade significantly. Fentanyl has become the leading killer of people from the ages 18 to 45 and is rapidly increasing overdoses and deaths of those under 18. More education in the form of classes, guest speakers, resource officer contribution could be more instrumental in educating our students. Safety is a big concern for many. A school shooter may be the worst nightmare for a community. While our administration and police force have worked out a very good plan for our school, budget and resources have created some limitations. I believe we need an armed officer in every school and more than one in a very expansive high school.
Okay.
Regardless, I think it needs to be addressed regularly.
Thank you for your comments.
I can't have it just a little bit more time? A little bit? I have concerns over the terms diversity, inclusion, and equity. These terms can be positive, but on the other hand, they can be interpreted in such a way to reduce or take away opportunities for some in favor of less qualified students, faculty, and administrators. Transparency is really important, and last year we had a drag queen episode shown in an elementary school, and very few people that I've talked to know about this. I don't know why that is, and I don't know if
Okay.
it's been addressed publicly.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. I'm not aware of that incident. Okay, is there anyone else here who would like to make some comments on any items that are not part of the action items portion of the agenda? Okay. Okay. Moving on to routine approvals, I'd like a motion to approve the routine approval listing as presented on the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion related to anything on routine approvals?
I'd like to make a comment regarding item 5P.
Oh, one moment.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
I didn't see it either. Sorry, I just watched
I'm
it.
sorry, let's go
Go
back
ahead,
to
go
public
back.
comment,
That
and
sounds
then we'll remember that we have a motion on the table. Spencer Chesney, I see that your hand is raised. If you'd like to unmute yourself and introduce yourself and where you reside in the district, then you'll have 3 minutes to speak. So thank you. Sorry I missed you.
No problem. Thanks, Amber. I am a parent of 2 children in the district. I live in Boalsburg. And I just, I think there was a large, I'm just responding to the previous participant, I guess. And that there's a large range of topics, but I just wanted to impress upon the board and him and I guess the other attendees in the room that particularly around things like using proper pronouns, the people that their chosen pronouns is not conflated with sexual orientation. They're totally 2 separate things, gender identity and sexual orientation. using pronoun, basically it's just, I think the idea, he made the comment that inclusivity, diversity, and equity are things that are positive, and that sometimes I guess they can be seen to be used to advantage individuals over other individuals for various reasons. And I just wanted to point out that the goal of all of these things, including gender pronoun usage, is just to make an environment for people to feel normalized and included. Just like we would want someone to be able to, use your chosen name. Just that I would say that it's common decency and respect to say that you would also use the person's name that they choose. It's not inappropriate for children to understand what their gender identity is or express who they are. And I think that extends to kind of many areas within the district that is related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think that underscores kind of the efforts that have been made in the trans and gender expansive policy. And that also goes towards allowing trans children to play in student athletics. It's about showing children that they are normal, that they may be different, but they are still normal, and they are still they should be afforded the same opportunities as all children to be able to engage in the same extracurricular activities that the speaker mentioned that are so positive should not be restricted from trans children. And there is a policy in place that enables that, and it has oversight, and there's discussion with families and superintendents. It's not been a problem within the district at all. And so I think I applaud the board for having what was mentioned in the last town hall, compassionate courage to be able to ensure that students have those access to those resources for all students. And there's really no harm being done, right? It's inclusive when done in a way that, again, looks at the needs of all students equally. Thank you.
Okay, Spencer, thank you for your comments. Anthony Teague, I see your hand raised. If you would like to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, and then
Sure.
you'll have
Hi.
3 minutes as well.
I'm Anthony. I'm a teacher in a adjoining district, but a resident of State College district. And I want to continue with what Spence was saying, maybe taking it a different perspective. It's been a long time since I've been in high school, but I'm teaching high school now for the very first time in many years. And I can see what a difference it makes for students to be able to express themselves, their sexual orientation. And it's really good. It's healthy. But I also see that there's more to go. It's more than just sexual orientation. It's also gender identity. And it's a good thing. And I encourage State College to continue to press forward and take that step. It matters. There are a lot of kids who need that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Okay, is there anyone else either online or in person here who would like to make a public comment? Okay, then. Seeing none, then we will move on to the motion to approve routine approvals, which has been motioned and seconded, and then Dan had a question.
I want to acknowledge a person who's volunteered to help the school district in one portion of our work, which is the Citizens Advisory Committee for School Health and Safety, of which I'm a member, and so is Gretchen. We're both members of that committee. I want to acknowledge the offer by Dr. Meredith Duran, who is a linguist with 25 years teaching and research experience. I just want to acknowledge her willingness to step up and provide assistance to us in our work in the school district. She's had multiple positions related to second language learning. Is currently the director for English for professional purposes. Director for English for Professional Purposes Intercultural Center, and she's an associate teaching professor at Penn State. But I mostly want to acknowledge her, yes, for her achievements, but also for her willingness to help us out. So, and that kind of volunteerism is something that's really helpful to the school district and to the board. Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you. Okay, yes, Laurel?
Thank you. I had a question about 5M, which is the memorandum of agreement with the
Immigrant Rights Clinic?
Immigration Rights Clinic, yes. And just, it says that they'll be doing some work. It is pro bono, so it's not a cost issue, but I'm just wondering what type of thing they might be doing with the work group. Because it's a little different than the purpose was stated last time.
Sure, I see Saria's online if you would like to fill us in, Saria.
Yeah, the purpose was the same. The purpose of the memorandum of understanding is exactly the same. They are still providing support for the work group. They still are open to providing professional development for the school district as well, pro bono. And the hope is also to continue to be able to do joint events similar to the Welcoming Week event that we did last week. So the charge is the same.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make, know about what. So I think we're fortunate to have resources like this in our front yard and backyard, side yard, all around us. So thank you, sir, Dr. Tattersall.
Thanks. And since we're discussing the Center for Immigration Rights, I was one of the board members that was able to attend the Welcoming Week meeting that we had in our high school last week. And it was I thought, a very enlightening event that brought together both law students at Penn State who were able to teach us a bit about current immigration law and some of the challenges currently happening with immigrants from Afghanistan who are working their way through the system, and we're having now some families from Afghanistan who are being resettled here in State College, Ukrainian families who are being resettled here as well. So they were able to give us some of the legal background, and then we heard from directors from a number of different either public agencies or private nonprofits who work directly with immigrant families who were able to talk about the services that they provide. So it was a good way for people who are working with immigrant families across the community to know about all the different services that are available to create more understanding of all the connections that could be made for those families. So it was really interesting to hear how much was happening in our community from various organizations to support families coming here with kids who will be English language learners in our district. So, okay. So anyways, yeah, glad to see the partnership with that center continuing as well. Anything else on routine approvals? Okay. All right, then we will take any public comments on the routine approvals. If anyone here would like to make a comment on routine approvals. Okay, or anyone remotely? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. So moving on to action items. Our first action item is a motion to approve the election of PSBA officers and insurance trustees as shown in attachment 6A.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion on this item? There was no competition for these slots?
I was going to say, they're all basically one candidate per office in terms of those who are up for election. So it's not a matter of making a choice, except to abstain. Apparently, they seem to allow that in their guidelines. But short of abstaining, we can endorse the slate of candidates as presented.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item B is a motion to approve Policy 100 Strategic Plan as shown in attachment 6B.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on this policy? This was just some minor revisions of the existing policy. Okay. All right, any public comment on this item? Okay. All right, then we'll have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Okay, that item is passed. Item C is a motion to approve the K-12 art scope and sequence as shown in attachment 6C.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on this item?
No, we just expressed a lot of appreciation at CCL for the thoughtfulness of initiating this class and also expanding opportunities in art for kids that maybe are not hardcore art students who want to, utilize this in other ways in their life.
Yeah.
And then thinking about it too, this is one of the benefits of that reorganization, the staffing reorganization that we approved several months ago, as I recall, at the middle level, I believe. I think, is that in the mix here or not so much? I was reading through the materials that supported this action item, and I got the impression it was tied into some of the reorganization that took place at the middle level.
Might affect,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
It
so
did.
The amount of time available.
Yeah,
for,
no, but available for the staff that they could commit, which might not have been available previously.
Yes, we were able to
Okay.
use one of those art teachers at the high school
Right.
to run
Okay,
more
great.
electives.
Great, thank you. Great.
Yep. Okay. Any public comment on this item? Okay, then we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Definitely.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item D is a motion to approve the International Baccalaureate Math Research Proposal as shown in attachment 6D.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. And I see that Terrell Salter, who is the lead researcher on this, whose proposal this is here with us remotely, if anyone has any questions for her. All good?
I'm just delighted to see these kinds of ideas come forward. And I want to have a question, I think perhaps for Terrell in all this, whether statistical analysis and the development of algorithms, not either or both of those ideas come into play in terms of students understanding mathematics and the role in its use in everyday life. Those are the two things I was wondering about, like whether those examples would relate to this particular research question that's being asked.
Let me see, I'm trying to click on Terrell here. Yes, here we go, here she is. Okay, Terrell, I've got you on now. Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Dan. We're actually beginning our first modeling project this week, and the students are choosing 2 metrics from the World Bank data set. One student wants to look at percent of a country that's urbanized and the population growth, and they're going to do a statistical analysis and see what conclusions they can draw and what conclusions they can't draw. So I think, for me, a big part of math modeling and using math to understand the world is becoming familiar with statistics and what further questions it opens and what it can and can't answer.
Thank you.
It's really helpful. Yeah, I think whenever you have your results on this and you've written your thesis, I think we'd all probably be interested in seeing it.
Yep.
So
I would be happy to share.
that would be great.
That'd be great. Keep us in mind.
Thank you.
Laurel?
And in addition to your thesis, if you could share the article you're going to be submitting, we'd be really interested in that.
Yes, this may be a year out, but yes.
That's okay.
That's okay.
I think this is particularly exciting to have this type of research in our district because the IB program tends to have students who are at a certain level of interest in academics. But this type of, since you're talking about teaching methods, I'm sure that and you're giving an in-service once you've worked on this study, I think that will help all the students in the district. And I think this is just very exciting.
Agreed. Yep. Yeah, thanks for being with us tonight, Terrell.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Okay, that item is passed. Item E is a motion to approve an amendment to the 2021-2022 PSU Psychological Services and Assistantship Agreement as shown in attachment 6E.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on this item?
I've questions about 6E and 6F. 'Cause
Okay.
They kind of go hand in hand. They both seem to relate to an agreement with the university's psych clinic, from what I can tell. One of the questions gets to the actual language in the agreement. Under 6E, you go to page 3 of the agreement. Oh, and I should also ask this question first. Talking about something which relates to 2022-23. This is for the current year. This isn't retroactive to last year. Is that correct, Randy?
6E relates to 21-22.
So it is the previous year. Okay.
That is correct.
So it's retroactive.
And the reason that we are bringing it forward is because Penn State brought back language changes.
I see.
That
okay.
they thought that they had included,
Got
or
it.
that came to us after you had already approved
Okay.
the document.
Got it. Well, that makes sense. It makes sense in terms of the reason for this as well in the memo. So thanks a lot. The and then in this particular instance, we're talking about our funding an assistantship for a graduate student, a 20-hour assistantship in the amount of, I think, the amount of $40,000 to support that student's basically education and training through the university. That's just the nature of the cost. The one of the things that had also occurred to me had to do with let me if I go back a bit. And this would have been something we would previously have approved, and if so, I would have missed this detail. But also on page 3, under paragraph 2, it indicates that this service is to perform school psychological services to complete full school-age multidisciplinary evaluations for potential special ed and special education or gifted education students. And this would include all the kinds of things that are involved with an evaluation like that. I'm asking because if this is a student who is in the clinical psych program, they will not have received the credential or the certification as a school psychologist. And where this gets to be a little bit hairy is that, or a lot hairy, is that the Chapter 14 regulations that support special education in Pennsylvania require a credential of a credentialed or certified school psychologist to be a member of the teams. So I'm just wondering, in terms of the nature of this agreement, how the district is planning to, in a sense, reconcile this kind of work on the part of somebody who's not a certified school psychologist to support or to provide the documentation necessary for a special ed placement. So, we may not have an answer for it right now, Randy. This may be something that we just need to kick back to Jean when she returns from vacation.
Yes, we'll have Jean respond.
I can speak to that, everybody, if you'd like.
Thanks,
This is
Jonathan.
Is Jonathan there? Good, Jonathan.
I am here. Hey, so we've had that agreement with the psych clinic for a long time, and that language has been in our agreement for as long as I've been in the district, especially when we didn't have as many psychologists to be able to help us out. We've been working with Penn State to be able to help us through that. If we were to be using anyone from Penn State who is not a certified school psychologist, they are working under some sort of supervisor at that point. Since we have been able to provide more school psychologists to help support the growing number of evaluations over the years, we've been really backing off of having to use Penn State. And obviously with the changes in the Penn State psych program, we know that we can't rely on that moving forward in the future. So at that point, we've maybe used them briefly to help do some additional testing and stuff like over the summer when we had a backlog of cases, but it's nothing that you need to worry about in terms of that. If we do work with any of the psychologists through Penn State, they would be working under a certified supervisor.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jonathan. That would have been my suggested solution to all this. Thank you. So I don't have any more questions about this item, and Randy's clarification helps explain the content of 6F as well. So
Okay,
we can go ahead.
great. Thank you, Dan. Any other questions on this? Any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney? Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item F is a motion to approve an amendment to the 22-23 PSU Psychological Clinic Agreement as shown in attachment 6F.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions, discussion? Okay. Any public comment? We'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney? Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item G is a motion to approve the 2022-2023 proposed SRO MOU with the Patton Township, and that is shown in attachment 6G.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on this item? Okay. Any public comment on this item?
Go
Or,
ahead,
sorry,
Laura.
Laurel?
Go ahead, Laurel.
Thank you. I just wanted to check something on here because it had come up in the past, and I want to make sure that I didn't see it written in here. In terms of the evaluation of the SROs, because it says that the SRO is under the, basically still works as an officer with the
police.
either Patton or the borough. How is evaluation handled, given that the person also works in the district?
It's a team effort. So whoever the building principal directly assigned to that area that the SRO is, and myself, the assistant superintendent, and the police chief.
So that it is a group.
It's a
The
group.
district has a role in that, a role to
Yes.
play in, say.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you
If
very
there's
much.
any concerns, we can address that as well.
Thank you.
And so, Curtis, just to follow on that that thought for a second, and to what extent is that documented? In other words, are there memos that go back and forth? Is there a paper trail for that work? As you would for any, if we did, let's say, a professional evaluation for a classroom teacher, which is highly, highly organized and highly legal, I mean, in this state, in this current era in which we live, that stuff is documented from soup to nuts, from the beginning to the end. Those evaluations are thoroughly laid out. And I'm thinking, in this instance, is there any documentation that follows this process, this communication, if you will, between the school administration and the borough or township administration?
I'm sure the police chief would have that information.
Okay.
We just provide information as
Okay.
part of that evaluation process.
Okay, so we provide them with qualitative or quantitative information
Yeah,
that
we have a
supports their
discussion.
work. Okay, thank you.
Amber?
Yes, Carlene?
Yeah, I didn't know if you saw that my hands was raised,
Oh,
so
thank
I didn't
you.
mean to interrupt anything if Curtis was not finished speaking.
Oh, go ahead, Carlene. Thank you.
We've had a lot of things on our plate this year with superintendent search and strategic planning and a few other things. And so I don't think it's our fault, but I really wish that we had a chance to get a lot of community input in this discussion because of all the emails that we received and all the discussion that this had. And so this is what really kind of bothers me with this vote today, because I don't think that people really understood what we're doing, and I don't think that we had enough community input. So in the future, and even with the climate survey that we're doing, that I think is a really great idea, and I wish that that could have been done prior to this vote, even though it's just kind of a renewal. I think that it would be really good to get a lot of community input because this is an issue that's really concerning to a lot of people. So I just wanted to note that.
Okay. Thanks. Carlene, do you mean like in terms of input, would you be suggesting that we have some town halls or some kind of information session?
I think the
for
town hall is
community?
very important because this conversation comes up a lot, and even in the CCL meeting that we had, which was really a small meeting, but we had quite a few people that showed up, and they were very concerned with this issue because not everyone sees, the SROs in the same light. Not everybody had the same experience, and I think that we should listen to a lot of people before we take these votes.
Peter?
Yeah. I wondered if there was any engagement by the school district with the new State College Borough Police Community Oversight Board. I'm looking at Curtis as if that was a question.
No.
Okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah,
No.
because I think because the SROs are a part of the borough police force, and because that community oversight board was formed, in order to have community sort of participation, and oversight with the police, and it can go any number of ways, but it just seemed to me that because the school district is a pretty big stakeholder, in that if we were able to have even a non-voting member, someone who is present at those oversight board meetings, I think that would just kind of increase the that's just more good communication. And obviously I thought that Officer Aston was, when he was here, he would have communicated with us all day if he could have about all the things that he works on. But having, I think another line of communication that is more sort of like community line of communication and not just the officer. That's not casting shade at the officer. I think that would be helpful. So that's an idea. I don't know if we would need to put that into an agenda item and blah 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 blah. That's fine.
It seems like that's something would Borough Council have to agree to provide us?
I think probably, and so it even if it just begins as a conversation or something like that, if that's of interest. And I think that was if I can follow on what Carlene said, because that's come up in so many ways. With different members of the community with very different political viewpoints or ideas about the role of the SRO, with discussions with police officers, with other leaders all around, with parents. And when David Hutchinson was on the board, he was very keen to run those public issues forums. And I think that this is the sort of issue that is really ripe for a public issues forum, which is a really well done, mediated, focused conversation. Members of the board can participate, but just be there with citizens and participate. And it's a structured, 2-3 hour engagement. And
I think that's a good idea.
I think that could work out really well.
I might suggest, if we're going to go that route, to think about broadening the topic to school safety and security a little bit more broadly.
Right.
Because and then talking about how the SROs fit into school safety and security, potentially.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we're working on currently, to create a website to be more transparent as far as the things that we are doing as a school district, our plan, what the SRO role is, and how do you report any kind of incident as far as safe to say and those type of things, and put in. And we're looking at other schools' websites around surrounding districts to see what they have in their on their website to emulate some of those things, so that people are aware of what we're doing.
And I was impressed with the borough's page related to SROs. The borough had a very, very helpful summary, which in a sense ran in parallel to these agreements in terms of describing the role for the SROs.
And we could potentially link to their site from ours.
You bet.
To add some extra information. Just to follow on further with the idea of a public issues forum, we've certainly over time gotten a lot of feedback on this issue, and I think after the horrible incident in Uvalde, it's brought concerns about school safety, to the top of mind for so many parents. And it might be worthwhile broadening the topic a little bit, because I think some of the feedback that we got at the committee was around so how are elementary schools part of our overall plan? So I don't know if we could have a town, public issues forum where there's a certain amount of information shared out by the district, but then so that people have some understanding of what's currently the strategic plan for security, and then gather information.
Point of clarification
Sure.
for process. Yeah. So could that become an agenda item for the CLC, for the culture learning?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have it scheduled.
Okay, great.
Yep. Laurel?
Thanks. For anyone who has a long memory, when this item came up last year, there were several board members. I was one, some are no longer on the board, but several of us stated very, very strongly that we thought it was necessary to do that type of a town meeting and get, maybe not a town meeting, but to get input, survey, focus groups, that type of thing. And I remember very specifically saying that I really did not want this to show up next year, meaning this year, as a routine item, that I thought it needed to be in our regular action agenda. So I wanted to say thank you very much to Mr. Johnson for doing that, and also he had reached out to explain that even though there really had been a promise to do this with the community before this came up this year, because of the things that we've been dealing with most recently, especially a major administration change, that simply couldn't be accomplished. And I appreciate very much holding off on having it on our agenda until we could talk about it in CCL, which we did, and there were several commenters. And I appreciate that in writing, in the beginning of the memo, it talks about this survey coming up and fairly soon. So just wanted to say again, thank you for reaching out and for making sure that we understand, all of us, that this will be happening, even though we promised it last year. It will not slip again.
Our just so you know, our next CCL meeting, we will be going over the school climate survey and the questions revolving around this topic.
Carlene, did you want to make another comment on this?
Oh, yeah. Well, basically, I was at the previous meeting about the superintendent search, and one of the things that people brought up was about how they love the fact that State College is very evidence-based, fact-based, and I think that's what's missing in this discussion. We also need to not do things to make us feel better, but it has to be kind of evidence-based too, that what we're doing is really appropriate. And so this is why I really feel like a community engagement information session would be really helpful.
Thanks, Carlene. Anyone else?
I guess the only other piece to this, which hasn't been mentioned explicitly, which is the inclusion of the, I think the second appendix to the MOUs. This is both in the borough and the Patton Township version, but there are two items. I'm not sure if they occurred in the previous documents, the previous MOUs or not, but I really value their inclusion in these materials, because it talks about the expectations that the SROs will participate in training offered by the National Association of School Resource Officers, but also along with that, participation in training related to equity, childhood trauma, cultural responsiveness, restorative practices, and other related activities, which are now a priority within the school district, that is now incorporated into the expectations for the trainings for the SROs, and also the opportunity to meet and collaborate, and work collaboratively between school administration and district administrators to develop and work toward mutually agreed upon goals and priorities with the SROs. So there's an opportunity for collaborative planning. And I think we can fold in some of these questions related to the concerns of the community when it comes to that collaborative work with both of those municipal governments and also with the SROs themselves. I think we can kind of blend. I'm thinking that we can provide an opportunity for for us to become more sensitive to the issues raised by the community and involve the SROs and their administrative supervisors to participate in this discussion about these issues.
Thank you. Okay. Cynthia, would you like to come make a public comment then? And Cynthia Young is the one of the co-chairs. Are you still one of the co-chairs? Is on our Race and Marginalized Population Working Group for the district. So.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. I am, as Ms. Concepcion said, the co-chair of RAMP, but I'm actually also the chair of the Community Oversight Board for the State College Police District. So thank you, Peter, for that kind of lovely invitation or suggestion, because I can say on that point that the COB can absolutely work with the school district to gather feedback, to think through the kinds of issues that an SRO presents. So that's not something that has to go through the city council, because COB is able to do continuing education. Okay. So that's just a sort of point of clarification moving forward. 100 people attended an open house that RAMP organized, I guess it's 2 years ago now. And the top issue was SROs. And it was a open house for families with BIPOC students. And I was actually surprised that that was the number one issue, because it's not as if there had been an incident with an SRO in our district that had sort of prompted it. But I think it speaks to the fact that this issue is complicated, and it's actually not just kind of pro or against. It's very multi-layered. I say that as someone who actually knows a lot about these issues. And what I think is missing in the discussion is that the issue of an SRO in the school isn't just about whether we like the person doing it. Like Officer Aston, I'm sure, is a perfectly lovely person. It's actually about the national climate and the regional climate and the state climate and the ways in which police violence is an issue that is constantly in the news. So, for example, it's not just BIPOC people who are more vulnerable to police violence in a traffic stop situation or an emergency situation. It's also mentally ill people. It's also people with visible and invisible disabilities. So it's not, and it's also people who are poorer because of the ways in which communities are policed disproportionately. So that's all just to say that if we had more public education around what an SRO does, then we might actually have discussions that were substantive and evidence-based and also based on research that's been out there on the impact of SROs. But I guess most importantly, we would actually have a very clear sense of what the impact of having an SRO is on our students, which seems to me to be the most important point. People like to say that having an SRO increases public safety, but of course the tragedy of Uvalde is that there was a very well-armed, very well-trained police force who did not act. And we also know in other school shooting situations, SROs who've not been successful at acting. So it makes people feel good to think that there's a armed police officer there, but actually the stats don't bear out their effectiveness in a situation with a mass shooter. It's also the case that mass shootings happen in a tiny proportion of our communities. It doesn't make them any less tragic. It doesn't make them any less awful. It just means that should it be the top thing that we're thinking about at all times? I'm not so sure. And that is finally to say that I'm confused and also concerned that the SRO is the only SCASD employee that I know of that the performance review doesn't get handled through SCASD, but we pay their salary. So we can put some input in there, but we don't have that much power to suggest what the SRO should do or shouldn't do. And so maybe an Aston will do what we've asked him to do because he wants to work with us and likes our ideas, but there's no guarantee that an officer down the road would have to necessarily do the things that we're asking them to do. And I don't know why that employee is the only exception to our kind of broad, need for training and accountability and performance evaluations. And so again, I think that we need to have much more public input, and not just in the survey, but having town halls, and not just one, having several, because I think it would be good for all of the community to understand that there's lots of perspectives on this, not just a pro or against without any kind of gray in between. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Okay, anyone else who would like to make a public comment? You're welcome to come up to the microphone. Okay. Check. Spencer, I see your hand raised if you'd like to make a public comment on this item.
Thanks, Amber. So yeah, I'll speak also on behalf as kind of co-chair of RAMP that's kind of 1 foot in and 1 foot kind of as member at large. But I think I don't want to be too redundant. I think Cynthia, very eloquent, kind of talked about the issues that we've been discussing within RAMP, and I appreciate Carlene's comments and Laurel's comments and Peter's comments on this topic as well. And the only things that I wanted to add was I wanted to reiterate that town hall or community engagement with focus groups, as Laurel mentioned, we talked about a year ago and hasn't happened. And I understand that there's other priorities potentially, but I think really need to happen. And just the CCL meetings are not enough, right? It's a meeting on a Tuesday at 10:30 in the morning during work, and is not sufficient to really get community input. And so it really requires a town hall meeting and focus groups to get, as Cynthia mentioned, the diversity of perspectives on an SRO's impact, both positive and negative. And I think also it's important for the board to look at the SRO more holistically. I appreciate Dan. I agree with Dan's comments that it's really helpful to have Appendix B in this. And I think it's important for the board to, in balancing both the needs of safety and criminal investigation with the needs of belonging and inclusion for marginalized students, to reevaluate, what is the best way of balancing that by looking at the responsibilities. And I'll specifically point to number 7 and number 10. For example, specifically just says being present and visible on school property and surrounding areas. And number 10, giving presentations to students and staff that are designed to promote a positive and safe climate. And I think to Cynthia's point, there are a lot of people that just having a police officer speak and give a presentation, they may be not supportive of a positive climate. And just having a police officer present on campus, both in many cases, is not effective in actually preventing violence, and then has the actual negative impact of people feeling not safe. And in the town hall we just had about the future superintendent search, there was a lot of comments about students feeling like SCASD is, especially the high school, is militarized, and that makes them feel like they're being watched constantly, not necessarily by Officer Aston, but just kind of the culture and the environment that it produces. And so I think it's great. We're going to have climate surveys, and I think I really implore that we do a focus group, and I implore that the board uses that data, as we mentioned, to reevaluate as a whole, what is the goal that we have, and how can we achieve those goals while minimizing as much harm as possible, and really evaluating with data, what is the impact, right? What is the positive and negative impact of that, of the involvement of an SRO and the school, and how can we potentially have the positive without the negative, and maybe that means having the SRO located in the police office off campus and not in the district. But those are the comments that I want to make. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Spencer. Is anyone else here or online who would like to make a public comment? Okay. Board members? Okay. Then we'll go ahead and have a roll call on this item.
Dr. Crevecoeur.
Oh, sorry, Carlene, are you available to vote? Should we come back to our last?
Yeah. Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yeah.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecoeur.
She must have stepped out. Okay. Okay, so that item has passed. Item H is a motion to approve the 2022-2023 proposed SRO MOU with the State College Borough. This is shown in attachment 6H.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this item? All right. Well, I'd really like to thank everyone who's made comments on this item, either by reaching out to the board over email, through, including the town hall we held prior to this, and then also in this meeting. So really, it's always good to hear various perspectives from the community, and I'll look forward to continuing a community conversation on this. So, okay, any public comment at this time? Okay. Then we will go ahead and have a roll call vote.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Abstain. I just feel like we need more community engagement in this.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you want to abstain on the other item as well?
Yes, I'm sorry. I got disconnected for some reason, and I
Okay.
apologize.
Thank you.
Okay, item I is a motion to approve the 2022-2023 consulting services agreement with 21 EdSpire as shown in attachment 6I.
So moved.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on this item? Okay. Laurel?
Yes, I have really struggled with this because I feel strongly that if people are going to be working with a coach in any way, they need to feel confident and want to work with that person. And at the same time, when we are doing coaching on behalf of the school, for someone with the school district, I think we have to look more than we might otherwise at credentials and that type of thing. And what really concerns me with this in coaching a superintendent is that the person selected has only been a superintendent for about 3 years. Which, to me, what I would be hoping that Mr. Johnson would be getting would be someone with quite a wealth of experience who could speak from that, and I think the district would benefit from that. So while I, respect the need to have the connection, and so I will vote for this, I really felt I had to say that I'm very concerned, and I hope that we will maybe keep an eye on, and that maybe if Mr. Johnson feels at some point that he needs some additional coaching in a different way, that you'll feel free to come back. Just because you've got this, we can still do another one if there is a piece missing. I think that so that was all.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, or did you?
Yeah, I just want to let people know that the average longevity of a superintendent is 3 to 5 years. So to have a superintendent last any longer than that is out of the ordinary nowadays. And Jackie has, and Francine can speak to that as the IU director, has really stepped up in our region and is looked up to as a expert in this area, and has provided a number of years of professional development for other superintendents in the area. I'm actually going to a superintendent's conference this week, and she'll be presenting there as well. So she's well respected in her area of expertise.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And will also benefit that she's a former SCASD community member, so she also has the benefit of knowing the nuances of our own community, which is a nice little added bonus, I think.
Well, just to acknowledge your comments, Mr. Johnson, about this person's role within the region. I've had several opportunities, but one in particular where there were a number of district administrators meeting with legislative representatives, and Jackie was among the 2 or 3 upper administrative leaders who really added value to that and provided an expression of need on the part of the member of the local districts, but did it very effectively. And I felt that she really represented that role, the role of a superintendent, very, very well in that situation. So that's one that reinforced what you had just shared earlier too, Curtis. I think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, I remember that meeting, and she had her data ready.
Yep.
I just also wanted to say that, in my opinion, it seems like the most productive and successful mentoring relationships come from relationships where the mentor and the mentee have chosen each other. And it seems clear that Mr. Johnson has chosen this individual to be his mentor. So I would like to support that. I have no concerns.
Okay, Any public comment on this item? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Moving on to item J, that is a motion to approve the 2022-2023 consulting services agreement with Capsult as shown in attachment 6J.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on this item? Any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Okay, that item is passed. Item K is a motion to approve the 2022-2023 SEAL program provider shown in attachment 6K. And that's Art Explorers.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Any public comment? Okay, we will have a roll call vote.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item L is a motion to approve the 2022-2023 CPI student tuition shown in attachment 6L.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion?
I'm curious about this is the debt service component for the tuition, and Randy, you might be able to answer this. Is this, I get the impression this is a way by which they're trying to recover or trying to cover the costs for their capital improvements at CPI, that this debt service amount of $1,213.97 per student is in addition to a base cost of $8636.78. And I'm not sure what that debt service means.
I think it's,
That's my hunch, that this is about recovering the cost of.
Surcharge?
well, it's, right, it's not necessarily a surcharge, it's just the portion of their annual costs.
Okay,
And that's what they're allowed to charge us, and it's just been broken out,
okay.
basically general and operating and the debt service.
And in terms of the providing this experience for the students, there's a transportation cost to us as well. In other words, district transportation will bring,
There is.
and it should be. I mean,
There is.
obviously driving the students to and from
And I
every
think
day.
that in a previous memo, that was detailed, but because
Okay.
these are additional add-ons,
Got it.
obviously, any opportunity we can to combine runs, we take advantage of that.
Exactly. And I think in no way I'm suggesting that I would deny these students the opportunity that's
you're just
provided
stating
through
fact.
CPI. Right, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and just for anyone in the public who's listening, because the State College Area School District has its own in our high school career and technical center, we pay for students to go to the Central Pennsylvania Institute of Science and Technology if they're enrolling in a program that we're not able to provide on site. So, other questions? Okay. Any public comment? Okay, then we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item M is a motion to approve the purchase of a CTC wheel balancing machine as shown in attachment 6M.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on this item?
It's a very important tool.
Yep. I think we've discussed this in culture, climate, and learning as well. So,
I just wanted to say that I appreciated the memo, that it really had the things that I'm often having to ask about. How did we get to this point and what's the cost? And also, I appreciate seeing it in here.
all right. Any public comment on this item? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Okay, that item is passed. Item N is a motion to approve the agreement with Christ Transportation as a contracted bus carrier, and this is shown in attachment 6N.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Questions or discussion?
I'm just here for questions.
We had a discussion around this at the finance meeting as well last week. So.
Yep. So I just want to say thank you. I know transportation has been a huge challenge in the past several years, and so I just want to. I was not at the finance meeting, so I'll just say thank you now. Thank you for all your work.
Sure. And we're hoping to have them on next Monday.
Great. To be able to start runs. Great.
Great.
All right. Any public comment on this item? Okay. We'll have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item O is a motion to approve Crabtree Rohrabaugh Architects and Associates as the facility capacity and attendance boundary analysis consultant. This is shown in attachment 6O.
So moved.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on this item? And Peter was the board member that sat in on the interviews for these consultants. So, Laurel?
Thanks. Yes, thank you very much for sitting in on those. We had a discussion back a long time ago when we were beginning to do this process about the importance, the value of having a board member be part of that. And I certainly, I did have some reservations. I still do, but Peter was able to address some of them because I reached out to him since he was in the meeting. I trust the other people in there too, but from a board perspective, it's nice to have that board member piece. Especially after hearing from Peter, I feel more comfortable with the choice of Crabtree per se. Crabtree, the concern I have is really where we are in the process. I would have preferred to have already had more discussion on what the next steps are, so what we're doing with this information when we get it, whether we'll be doing things like having many districts will have a task force, or they will have guidelines for coming additional to just location, things like that. And so I think that as they begin to do this work, it's really important that we begin to think about, as a district, as a board, how we're going to use the information, because that's often, before this is done, we want to go ahead and get this started. But that's the concern I had about moving forward at this time.
So do you have a proposal or request at this time for that in regard to what you're looking for?
I've looked at several other areas, and I can certainly forward to the rest of the board some examples I've seen that I think might be a good process. I didn't want to get into that detail now, other than to just say, I think it needed to be mentioned that this is only one piece of it. This is a data piece. This is an expertise piece. We still have to make decisions.
So maybe it might be helpful to, I think we would probably do this anyways, but to have the Facilities and Grounds Committee have this on an upcoming agenda for discussion around that process.
Yeah, my understanding was the first step was gathering data at what our facilities are and what our potential needs might be, which may result in a moot point and no need for attendance boundary adjustments. So I would hate for administrative staff to spend a lot of time deciding on how to redistrict attendance boundaries when we don't yet know that we actually need to do that. While I agree it's important to start to wrap our minds around what that process might look like, should we need to go down that path, it would be premature to get overly detailed at this point in time, I believe, to then, until we know that we have that path to take.
Can I?
Yes, Randy?
Sure. So Crabtree has a kickoff meeting scheduled with Danielle Yoder and myself next week.
Great.
And in that, I've already charged them that I expected a timeline, decision points, data information that they would be looking for from us, so that we can chart that out, so that we can report, yes, this is on my request for an agenda that I'll be sharing with Dr. Buck for the next Facilities and Grounds meeting in October, so that we can report out, so that we can get feedback. I agree with you that we need to gather some data. We need to look at our current facilities and understand what our capacity is in each of those. I also expect that we're going to need to report out to committee, to board, and to community what our facilities are, how our facilities are being used at this point in time. So, and that will be added to what I believe the Crabtree timeline will be, because I think that regardless of what potential actions may need to happen, and those actions could be realignment of our attendance boundaries. They could be some modifications or additions to specific buildings, or it could be nothing. But regardless, we're going through a process. We've just had 1 year, and now we're in our 2nd year where there are 5th grade classrooms in this administrative building. And so we know that there is potentially a problem there. We need to understand in the Mount Nittany Elementary building what that looks like. Are there other potential pitfalls, as you could call them? But there's also been a lot of changes in our elementary program just since our 3 most recent building projects were completed in 2019, and that is only 3 short years ago. And so I believe that you as a board and the community are due some information about that, because you as a board had lots of conversation with community members about the right sizing of each of those schools. Quite frankly, whether even one of those schools would remain open. And so, that's on my expectation list. As far as additional items and items for how decisions would be made, what feedback, I do agree. I think we need to get a lot of other information together first, and then there can be a process. I believe it was in policy committee or it was in facilities and ground. I've honestly lost track, but there was discussion about the attendance boundary policy as well. And so that will be a point of discussion. Again, I think that the appropriate place, because this process will begin with facilities and grounds, would be that location. But it may need to flow through the policy committee just to make sure that we're getting another set of eyes on it as well. So the only thing that I would add is that if there are specific things by any board members that you are looking for, that you pass those along to Dr. Buck or myself or Mrs. Yoder, in order to make sure that we're not backpedaling and we're playing catch up. I just, the only caution that I have is that some items, it may be okay for us to put on our list, but they may not end up being necessary. We just don't know yet. But I'd rather have that in advance, because this is another add-on to our normal processes, and so we want to make sure that we don't have any misses, because we would like to get this completed as quickly as possible, but yet thoroughly.
Absolutely.
And if there's any other questions, I know I talked very quickly and kind of rambled there, but I've become very passionate about this. I've worked very hard to understand our facilities and also to understand our programs from the best of my ability. But combining that use of buildings and things it has become something that I have come to understand. I'm sure not nearly as well as Mrs. Yoder, but I'm here right now.
It's a little like a Swiss watch, right? There are a lot of cogs and gears, and trying to overlap programming versus space, especially when sometimes we have growth in things like adding our 5th special for STEM, which needs a full-size classroom, versus buildings that have ELL learners or need more interventionists working with students. They need smaller spaces. And so while our new buildings were built to try and accommodate all those needs, our kids' needs are shifting and changing all the time, and so we're needing to evolve how that's going to work. So I think this will be really helpful for us to understand, and just for the community to know. I mean, it's comprehensive. Even though elementaries is our big question mark, we will also still be getting information about how those elementaries feed into our middle schools, which will be important information for us as we look to things like a renovation or rebuild at Park Forest Middle School.
Absolutely.
Which we know is a need in our capital projects plans.
And quite honestly, it'll help us springboard into that process.
Exactly.
In the not too distant future.
So this is
something that's on the front burner.
This is
Yes.
this is critical on a lot of facets to really help us shape our next phase of capital planning.
Yep. Other questions? Okay. Yeah. So if we have questions before your meeting with them, we should get those to you. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or
I don't know that I
if
do.
you don't think
but,
they're
yeah.
related to that meeting, they could at least come to the next facilities meeting.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks so much. We'll go ahead and see if there's any public comment on this item. Yes, you can please, if you'd like to come up to the microphone.
Very short.
That's okay. We just want to make sure that we can catch your comments.
We have some participants that are online.
Yeah, so that
they might be able
everyone
to
who's
hear you as
viewing
well.
remotely can also hear.
Comment is more probably of question because I'm somewhat ignorant of the processes, ignorant. There seems to be an awful lot of consultants, and I just wonder, not having a lot of experience, and you people do, are all these consultants really necessary? I mean, I think we do have a lot of expertise within our school, and we talk about facility boundaries, which I know you're talking about classrooms, schools, athletic facilities, but we certainly do have, I think, expertise, and there is a budget. So how much are we handing out to consultants when in fact maybe we can make our own decisions?
Yeah. Well, to clarify what's this this consultant, we need a demographer who's familiar with working through understanding building plans and land development plans throughout all of the municipalities so that they can predict the school-age population in a geographic manner for our district going forward. So this is definitely not expertise that we would have within our district. It really requires a professional demographer to do that kind of work. So that's why we need a consultant to do it.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Any other comments? Okay. We'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff. Yes. Ms. Zidney. Yes. Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt. Yes. Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Okay, so that item has passed, and I'm going to suggest that we take a 5-10 minute break before we move on to the second half of the agenda. So we will adjourn temporarily.
You're watching CNET, Center County's Government and Educational Access Network.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Our first information discussion item, item A, is looking at the intermediate unit, or what we call IU10 update. This is shown in attachment 7A, and I'd like to welcome Dr. Francine Endler here with us today. She's the director of our intermediate unit. So I'll welcome you and turn this over to you and to Curtis to provide this update to us.
Thank you all very much for having me this evening. My name is Francine Endler, and I'm the Executive Director of Central Intermediate Unit 10. I promise, this is pretty well rehearsed. I have about 10 slides and 10 minutes.
Great.
You all have been very busy this evening with a lot of important work. In your packet, you have some information, including this PowerPoint. So I know it's going to be displayed, but I also wanted to point out a few other things that are in the informational packet. In case you're wondering why my packet is orange, it is simply because that one has my notes in it, and I didn't want to be handing out my notes to all of you. On the left side of your packet, you're going to find some information about some services and supports that are currently being provided to the State College Area School District by Central Intermediate Unit 10. Some of those supports are complimentary, and some are a fee for service. There's an informational sheet about intermediate units in general. There are 29 intermediate units in the Commonwealth, and just some ways that we have been keeping students safe and healthy. All the programs listed here aren't necessarily provided by Intermediate Unit 10, but that's a larger look at intermediate units. And then there is some information back from March of 2021 where intermediate units were asked to stand up vaccination clinics in the Commonwealth. And I do want to say, again, thank you very much to the State College Area School District that was willing to host that vaccination clinic. Many of you may not know that 4 days before the intermediate units were tasked by the Department of Health to stand up those vaccination clinics, we had a major roof collapse in our building in West Decatur. I was about 6 months in to a new job, so that was pretty rapid learning curve. On the right-hand side of your packet, there are some fast facts about Central Intermediate Unit 10 that you can take some time to look at. There's a state mandates checklist that I am providing to all of the school boards in the region. We we purchase a service from another one of our intermediate units to curate a list of all of the mandates that are required by schools in the Commonwealth. And we extend that information out to all the school districts. The last time our superintendent's group met, we talked a little bit about that. So in case you wondered how many mandates are required by school districts, that will give you a little bit of information. So some follow-up here. Central Intermediate Unit 10 is one of 29 intermediate units in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Since I took the reins at IU10 on July 1st, 2020, thought it would be a good idea to change jobs in a pandemic. We have worked on our own comprehensive planning process, and we have a new mission and vision statement, which you can take a look at. Along with that mission and vision statement was a new logo, which you will see on the Fast Facts document and the menu or the listing of services. That part of that, the new mission, vision, comprehensive plan, is part of a rebranding of Central Intermediate Unit 10. As you can see by the map of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as I said, there are 29 intermediate units. IU10 is Clinton, Clearfield, and Center counties. So we are perfectly positioned right there in the middle of the Commonwealth. On the next slide, I give you just a brief outline of the schools that we serve. There are 12 school districts in Center, Clinton, and Clearfield counties, 7 in Clearfield, 4 in Center, and Clinton County only has 1 school district, which is Keystone Central. We also provide services to 4 charter schools and currently 11 non-public schools. There are over 70 non-public schools within the footprint, but we are providing services currently to 11, and we have 3 career and technology centers. You may wonder how an intermediate unit is governed. Well, we have representation from all of our member school districts. 2 of your members, Dr. Duffy and Ms. Huff, are members of my intermediate unit board. Public school code says I have to have a minimum of 13 board members. I can have up to 35 board members. I do not have 35 board members. I have 13. And State College has 2 because of the size of the district. IU board members are elected by districts for 1 of 3-year terms. We too have public meetings. They're typically held the 4th Thursday of the month, simply to try to work around the board meetings of all of our sending schools. And we do not have a large amount of committees. We do have a policy committee and a facilities and finance committee, and can make ad hoc committees as needed. And I do want to say that our facilities and finance committee has been very busy in the past several years. The governance of our board and what do they do, the role of the IU board, a little bit different. Some similarities, some differences. They do appoint and evaluate me as an executive director, similar to what you do for your commissioned officers. They approve the hiring of professional and non-professional staff appointments, contract for specialized services, and we have a litany of contracts all the time that we bring to our board. They adopt an IU budget. All of you as member school districts are required to adopt one portion of our budget, which is the general operating portion. That's small compared to the other budgets that we have. It's in a school district, it's a general operating budget, so it's one big item. In a intermediate, it's like a tapestry. It's a bunch of quilts of different types of budgets. We receive and expend funds to conduct programs. We designate a depository and employ a solicitor. What we do not do is we do not levy taxes. We are not a taxing organization, and we are also not able to have bond issues for construction. So construction in my world is financed a little bit differently. An organizational chart. We are a small IU by comparison to some of my colleagues across the Commonwealth. I have 145 employees. Some of our larger intermediate units, I'm not the smallest, but I'm on that end of the continuum. Some of my colleagues in southeastern Pennsylvania and in western Pennsylvania, particularly IU3 in Allegheny County, they can have upwards of 3,000 employees. So I'm a much smaller organization, and you can see our organizational chart there. You also may be curious about how is an intermediate unit funded. We began in 1971 and established by the General Assembly, and it replaced the 67 county educational offices that existed. So it went from 67 county education offices to a smaller 29 intermediate units. Also, the City of Philadelphia School District and the City of Pittsburgh School District are their own intermediate units. In 91, the intermediates role was restructured by legislation, so our subsidies began to be limited in the early 90s, and districts then purchased services from intermediate units, typically in by and large special education services that the districts themselves could not provide. In 2011, those state subsidies were eliminated, and as we moved past 2011, the state said, intermediate units, you must have an entrepreneurial function to what you do. So while we provide educational services, we also have the ability to develop services and products for sale. And then intermediate unit boundaries became open then when the marketplace sort of opened up. The funding of Central Intermediate Unit 10 pie chart on the next graph just shows how we're funded in general. About 31% are federal allocations, 25% state allocations, and our marketplace revenue is just over 25%. Our overall budget is about $26 million. Again, as a general operating budget, you all approve a very small portion of that. At IU10, we serve children from birth through adult learners, and not every intermediate unit has an adult education program, but we do. So as you're looking at the last slide and how we serve our communities, we have preschool early intervention, so those are our youngest learners. We have special education and non-public student services, so that services our school-age children. The Development Center for Adults are our adult learners who are looking to go back to get their GEDs or to get some additional instruction as adults. We have a robust curriculum and innovation department that looks at professional learning, coaching, and we do provide some of those services here at times to the State College Area School District. We do have administrative and management services that can be provided either through the executive office, business office, or technology department. That is probably a very fast 30,000-foot view of Central Intermediate Unit 10. I do want to say also that not only for the vaccination clinic, but recently, this past summer, State College wonderfully opened its doors to over 100 educators across a 3-county area to be trained in crisis response. And I'm pleased to also say that the IU will be bringing back our same trainer from the Oregon area in about 6 weeks, and another 80+ educators will be trained in our facility in Phillipsburg. 3 big items going on at the IU right now. We are looking for a forever home, and it has been a journey. We are going to get there. It's just a long and winding road, but we will find exactly where we need to be. We also, as I said about the flight crisis response training, so at the end of November, we'll have 200 educators divided up into teams ready to respond to any of our school districts should we have a critical incident of any kind. And that is a remarkable testament to educators being willing to be trained. And the trainer that we are bringing in has been involved. She's nationally known and has been involved in every major critical incident with schools probably over the last 20-some years, 30-some years, including Columbine, Uvalde, and some of the other tragic occurrences that have happened in schools. And also, we are pleased to be partnering with the National Dropout Prevention Center and Intermediate Unit 8 to train a cadre of about 50 educators on trauma-skilled training. So trauma-informed is knowing about the process, when what is trauma and how does it impact people. Trauma-skilled is the operational next steps. And I was very fortunate that the executive director at IU8 reached out and said, hey, would IU10 like to partner with us and provide this training free of cost to those districts. So you will have teams trained. Districts who are participating will have teams trained to come back and train their own staff, and then I have a team that will be trained to provide technical support.
Great. That's great.
Any questions?
I would just like to take this opportunity to publicly thank you for helping me on board as an interim superintendent. You have kept me well informed about the things going on in Pennsylvania Department of Education and just things I needed to know as an interim superintendent, so thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Dan or Jackie, anything to add since you're our representatives?
I'm just really pleased to sit on the board, and thank you so much for everything you do, Francine.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
And Dan's been a long time
Doctor,
member of the IU
I've
board.
been an IU board rep since I came came to the board 7 years ago, to the district board. And having worked I worked for like 6 or 7 intermediate units over the years, so I kind of knew enough about how they function. And they're very different in different parts of the state. I worked for Montgomery County for a while. My first real job was working at IU8, actually. I was an intern psychologist back in the day, and I mean back in the day. But so it's a different animal. It's really different from a school district, and but it provides all these services that otherwise would go unseen, or at least I wouldn't say unnoticed, certainly, but it certainly would have, or perhaps not as fully recognized. But I'm glad you were able to share with us the full range of services that the IU is providing, because they're provided to State College Area School District students, future students, or maybe past students in terms of the adult ed side. So there's a lot of good, that happens through this organization. And Dr. Andrew has been an incredible leader, and kind of coming into during a difficult time with the pandemic, because as you describe it, the pandemic kicked in during the interval after the decision to hire and then actually coming on board. It was about a three-month period. It was during that time that the pandemic really kicked in, so that made it that much more challenging. And not to mention the roof collapse at West Decatur. I mean, that was another exciting adventure that took up a lot of everyone's time, but particularly Francine was a just really effective leader in terms of helping everybody make sense of what had taken place and what our options were, and how to move on from there, basically. And we're still in that process at this time, but it's really been going really, really well, and it's been a real pleasure to have your leadership with the IU.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Peter?
Yeah, I just have a question. Well, first, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. You talked about critical incidents, and you raised school shootings as the examples. Is there engagement between the intermediate unit and the emergency response and hazard mitigation teams, like where extreme weather events are concerned?
Right, so the response team could cover any critical incident, the death of a student, the death of a staff member, so anything that a school district, an incident that they would have that they would need or want to have additional assistance provided to their school district. Weather incidents, I don't know that had been something that was necessarily connected with in terms of emergency management. I do know that there were several, the group of people being trained ranged from, they were all school district employees or connections, but we had administrators, we had school counselors, we're having school psychologists, some districts who had school resource officers districts decided who they wanted to bring with them. So it's more of a response of this team into the school district. We would certainly, support anybody coming in, but it's not necessarily connection with emergency management.
Got it. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Other questions?
One other thing I just wanted to add, only 3 intermediate units in the Commonwealth do not have any membership fees from their sending districts. Intermediate Unit 10 is one of those 3. So we, I often want to put that out there just because that's another difference as well. So thank you so much. I hope you don't mind if I exit stage.
That is totally okay. I know you've got a long drive.
Bit of a journey.
Yeah.
So again, thank you for your kindness. My contact information is in the folder. If there's anything I can help with, please don't hesitate.
And this was really an informative presentation. So,
thank you.
And
so
thanks
much.
for the state mandates checklist. That's really helpful to have that
You're
document
welcome.
too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on then to item B under info discussion, we'll be looking at the physical plant and north building remodeling project and the LEED certification there. This is shown in attachment 7B. So we'll have Randy Brown and Mike Fisher, who's our director of facilities, with us for this item.
So we had a healthy discussion with most of you, but not all of you, at Finance and Facilities last week.
All of us who were there.
Yes. all of you that were there, it was a healthy discussion. Right. I meant out of those here.
I know, I'm teasing you.
Okay. Lighten up, Randy. It's early compared to how late it could be, but it's still early in the evening. So basically, cutting to the chase, the request for consideration from the administration was, there was a resolution that the board passed a while ago that all new buildings, projects of certain criteria, which the physical plant building would definitely be one, and then I guess actually CTC remodel would also be meet those criteria as well. Would meet that those projects would need to meet LEED Silver certification, and what we have put into our design thus far is that they would be LEED Silver, but we were wondering if the certification requirement would be necessary for the projects. And what we discussed was that the rationale was that it's an additional financial cost and then also time cost. And the financial cost is in the memo, I believe, that for the facilities building, it would be an additional $50,000 to $100,000, and for the north building renovation, it would be an additional $25,000 to $50,000. It would also be additional time, not only in the preparation, but also potentially in the construction, meaning that it would be additional engineering and architect time, and then potential time for the contractors. And as Mr. Fisher mentioned at committee, I'm just trying to give it a synopsis. Some of the contractors that would be potentially bidding on this project because of the scope may not be as familiar with LEED as the contractors that we had on our high school projects, which were much larger. And it was a very healthy conversation, and the committee did not, those committee members present did not reach a consensus. And so we felt that obviously it would have came to the board as an agenda item, but because of the discussion, we felt that it needed to come as an information item and then hopefully follow up on October 3rd as an action item. Because of the timing of both projects, we need to know now versus later. I think the only other item, and if I screw this up, Mike, please correct me, but the only other item would be that currently we're using Hoffman, Leakey and Associates as our architect, and then I forget the engineering firm.
Reese Hackman is the ones that have they have people on staff that have the certifications of LEED, B, D, and C.
Correct. But if they, because they don't do it as often, if we need to move, if we get into a position where we need to move to another firm, that could add cost and time as well. So just throwing that out there, but that does not mean, for the North project, we'd really like to have that available over the summer to make some transitions occur, not only out of the Fairmont building, but also this building. But if it's into the school year, we can, we obviously will live with that too. I'm not trying to put a time pressure on you because there's not necessarily. It's just the sooner we get the project done, the sooner we can move on with other things. The facilities building would not be, no matter what, it would probably not be ready for the start of the school year. It would be, a year from now, or maybe even a few more months than that. I do okay?
Pretty good.
Okay.
So, questions? I have questions, or comments at least, but,
This is
Peter, do you want to go ahead since it's your chair of that committee? And
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Deb, go
ask
ahead.
a quick
Yeah.
clarification. As far as the additional time required to do the certification, can we get an estimate that's more than just a little bit more time is required? Do we have any idea? Like, are we talking a couple of months? Are we talking 6 months? Are we talking?
There's a lot of factors in that.
I
mean,
understand.
if I had to guess, I'd say 1 and 6 months. And
Okay.
here's why we haven't taken the time to really dive in and look at workload from our current firm that we would use, that are already in-house firm, and if we had to outsource that to another third party, what does that look like? Does that firm have time, to go through this process with us fairly soon? So there's a lot of unknowns in that.
But that's helpful.
Yeah,
Can I
and then
ask a follow-up then? So when we're talking about time, when you say 6 months, do you mean adding 6 months to the completion date for the project, or the, like, because I'm assuming like the work is happening at different points.
Correct.
So
Most of this work happens concurrently.
Right. Mhm.
Right. It's really about the workload of the firms we would engage to
Mhm.
in the certification process. It's that added workload to see whether they have the time in-house,
Oh, I
from their
see.
internal, to be able to accomplish that in the time frame that we're looking for. Right.
to do the work on the front end with the design team.
That's a lot of it as well. Yes.
But it would be through the entire process.
Right, because there's certification.
And as Randy
within building.
And as Randy alluded to, there are steps in place that the contractors would have to follow. And for these jobs, I'm just trying to think through in my head the contractors I know that might bid on these jobs, and maybe they probably aren't quite as familiar.
Mhm.
We could very well find someone that knows the process in and out. That's certainly possible.
Mhm.
But
So in terms of needing to have a firm to do the lead certification, like when I think back to the high school project, had we selected that firm at this point in the planning process? Because I feel like I remember that happening later, but maybe I'm remembering wrong.
So to go through the entire process as far as certification,
Yeah.
we really need to, those are answers that kind of need to be up front, so
Mhm.
because the lead process starts now and kind of goes
I don't remember
through.
selecting a firm at the end.
For the commissioning, doesn't happen until the end.
Right,
But do you feel like in terms of Hoffman Leakey and their design services that you need to have the firm that's going to do the certification on board now?
So we're looking for guidance on that. So Reese Hackman, a member of our engineering team, has gone through this process. They have personnel that are certified and qualified. We haven't gone through the exercise yet to sit down with them and say, okay, and really get into the weeds with it and say exactly how many personnel hours is this going to take above and beyond, and then do you have the actual time to get that done above and beyond just a traditional design concept. We've gone through timelines, kind of informal timelines between us, just for the building itself, and not necessarily the actual certification process. So we haven't gotten into those weeds to that extent yet. So that answers your question.
Mike, just something that Amber said led me to a question. Would Reese Hackman then be doing the actual commissioning, or is that a separate firm?
Commissioning is always separate.
That's what I was trying to understand. Like, are you talking about needing to bring that firm on now?
I'm sorry?
The lead
Basically
commission.
making sure that all the systems function as they were designed. So typically,
Because we always have building
reviewing the
commissioning
lead-
at the end of a project.
Review the lead checklist to ensure that we have achieved certification. So there's, right, am I correct?
it goes above and beyond that. So we would commission these spaces above and beyond any lead certification to make sure all the systems are actually working as intended by design. So, and again, commissioning agents, most people do engage them at the end of projects. It's actually much more beneficial to engage them in the beginning of a project so that they know what the design intent is and are in with those conversations in the beginning. So.
That's helpful to understand. Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, there's in the lead process, having basically everybody together at the beginning is really, really important, so that all of the potential, the things that might come up, that they come up, and then you get to sort through them, and then the certification level that you're going to is, and the 5 different categories in the lead checklist, that, you say, well, I guess maybe that one isn't as important, and blah, 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 blah. In terms of engaging other firms who can help with this, obviously you want to do that right at the beginning. So, in the facilities, the joint committee that we had, facilities and finance, I had talked about the Ferguson Township Public Works building, which is kind of a similar building in a number of ways. It's got big bay doors and et cetera, et cetera. And the architecture, the design firm that was engaged was really skilled with those kinds of buildings, but they didn't have a lot of lead experience. So in that case, and this is not an advertisement, there was contracting with the 7 Group, who had a lot of experience on the lead side for the design charrette portion, because then they could just be incorporated by the architects, the engineers, and that was all very technical. Most of that was at the beginning, right, for design, and then in reporting, because there's all the ongoing reporting. And that reporting, I understand, it's kind of tedious. You have to, and that's where a bunch of the time suck is. It's in design, it's in reporting, there's modeling earlier so that you can do the comparisons, and then you have to have the commissioning to do that. And all that is time, that's money, right? And often the people who have done that, you have to have a LEED certification in order to do that, and that typically for the individual salary has like a 2% bump on that person's salary from the certification. And so who soaks that up? Us, right? So we're just going to pay a little bit for that premium. So is that helpful?
Mm-hmm.
I also have thoughts about the actual certification process itself, but if there are other questions about and whether we do it, but I don't want to go into that unless if there are other things on the
Right,
table.
if there's other questions to be asked, right? Dan?
This is not near the level of technical expertise that Peter's talking about and that you've shared so far. This is a much more simplistic way of putting it. We're talking about the time, there's a financial side to this, but there's also a time requirement for all this. In terms of the functional needs of the school district, in terms of what facilities we need at a certain point in time, are there criteria, I should say, are there things that we can, are there ways in which we need to find ourselves to have an absolute threshold for accomplishing a certain facility in a certain period of time, which will rule in or rule out working towards LEED certification? In other words, are there such needs that we have at this point in terms of anticipating the timeline for getting things done, where we just have to simply say we can't accomplish LEED certification because of the time restraints it's placing on us in relating to, as it relates to getting the facility that we really need? Are there some absolute needs that we have to take into account?
Realistically, I would say no.
Okay.
We are, if you look at Fairmount, from my perspective, Fairmount is, we're running on thin ice over there.
Right, exactly.
Without, large monetary contributions to keep that building, operational, and not just for facilities, but for, the other staff and programs that are in it. So that's where my, the largest driving factor from my perspective is. And Panorama here, we have some space crunches. I don't want to speak for Randy, but I assume, if it's, could live with it for, let's, but that's really where I'm coming from. And like I worry about Fairmont about every day.
Oh, it's
so.
It's now 120 years old or whatever. 110
So,
years old.
110.
So, but
yeah.
it's once again, you can always limp by with things, right?
Mhm.
We do
But
it
we're
all the
talking
time.
about months, not years of delay.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Peter? Yeah.
No.
Laurel?
Are you going to say something? No.
Okay.
Conversation, this was discussed at the CAC meeting, and I wanted to share what they talked about, but I think we need to go a little further and hear from people. We're thinking in terms of, the issue, and it came up in the committee as well, is because we have this resolution, is whether that was every single building, or whether there's a difference, because we're a school district, in educational buildings that we have students in, and other things. And what we're talking about here is a building that would not have students in it.
To be clear, the north renovation,
Student space.
a portion of it will have students.
Right, no, I was talking just about the facilities part. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
That's
sorry.
fine.
Which is on our high school campus.
It is on the high school campus. The CAC, I think to a person and emphatically, felt that given the cost issues, paying in effect the premium for LEED really was beyond our mission as a school district. So I'm just sharing that opinion.
Do
and
they
I'd
have
say
an
that-
understanding of verifying high-performing buildings?
My impression
I'm not trying to say that in a
my
critical
impression
way,
is
I'm just
they-
saying-
not everyone did, but that a number of them did. They
Like
talked,
why we would do the lead? Do they understand?
the questions that they asked, as I listened, seemed to indicate yes. More knowledge than I do.
Well,
Let's put it that way. Randy,
Can I just
Absolutely.
clarify? I believe that it was, we're not saying that we will not put lead in the building. We will meet the resolution minimums of silver. It was, they did not feel that paying the premium
Right.
for certification was necessary.
yes, I'm sorry if I misspoke. It was the premium part. It wasn't that we shouldn't do the work.
Although I'm not sure that all of them would agree that that
Yes,
was necessary.
but I think there was a general understanding that given our resolution and given our history.
And that there was advantages to
And that
some
there-
of the lead.
Well, yes, absolutely.
We
The
want to have
environmental
high-performing
pieces.
buildings.
Yes, yes, absolutely, so.
It was more of the certification.
Sorry, Amy, did you have a question?
I do have one other clarifying question. You're not on. I am on. Oh, sorry. I appreciate the timeline question, but the thing that I'm not 100% clear with, and I know there's a lot of unknowns, is as mean as it is to say to you, Mike, you and the facilities plant can limp through at Fairmount potentially while that building gets, while things potentially happen. But the CTC renovation spaces are for student use, and we want to get those students out of Fairmount. So that's a bigger issue and concern for me about timeline in terms of delaying when that could be completed. And I don't have a good recollection, but I thought our goal was probably to have that space open and available for next school year, so September of 2023. So that, I guess, is the question I have is, because we're dealing with two facilities. So to me, that one is more pressing, and whether you think certification would prevent us from being able to have that space available, because that gets students out of Fairmount. I want the custodians out of Fairmount too, but we really need the right program and the other things in CTCs, the old CTC space, in my opinion.
My gut response is that if we went through the certification process for the CTC remodel, I would be very tough to get in there by the start of the school year. We're already up against it now.
That was my concern. Okay.
But we're moving forward, and we're moving forward in ways that we can still roll in the certification process. So we're not too far, We can pause at any time, take a step back, and then roll in the process. That is certainly possible. I would say that it would be highly, highly unlikely to be able to get in there before the start of the school year if we took a step back now. So we're not too far gone that we can't, but it would be highly unlikely.
Okay. Thanks. That's what I wanted to do.
Thank you.
And yes, I mimic your sentiments about getting the kids out of that building before facilities. We can handle it for a little while longer. It's fine.
So are we talking about adding 2 months to the amount of time they would be in Fairmount, or we're not talking about adding a school year to the amount of time they're in
I
Fairmount?
don't think it would be a school year, no.
No. So it's just
I think right now, we're up against it to get in by the start of the school year. You're probably looking at, once again, this is a high level. It's kind of a best guess. Maybe a couple months to 4 months. Christmas.
Okay.
Yeah,
And Peter, if you want to weigh in, you've been through the process, as well. If you think
Well, I think regarding the CTC, because that has to go into, that's like being put into like this other existing facility.
Yeah.
Right. So that, that's different from a whole new building. Right?
Right, because it's a renovation.
Yeah, it's a renovation. It's not as large of a space. It could be prioritized in terms of the timeline. I think that since I don't know the spaces nearly as well as you do, that obviously I have to hedge a little bit about, I don't want to prognosticate too much. I suspect that you're right that, well, if we go through this, getting them in there at the beginning of next school year, given what time of year it is right now, yeah, that's a challenge. I am not really all that worried about that. And, I mean, of course, I want students to be in a better facility, but a couple of months I think that they'll be okay. Yeah.
Well, I'll just say that's an equity issue too, that these students have been in this substandard facility for a really long time.
But not necessarily the same students, though.
That doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, I think doing the best work that you can to have the best performing facility that maximizes the principles of really good, healthy design is taking that time for a much longer term benefit for all students instead of, maybe speeding some things up so that you can get in there 2 months earlier. I mean, and I really don't mean to be flippant. I know I'm going like, meh, but I don't mean that in a flippant way.
But nobody's proposing on doing less, Peter. It's, I understand you've already remarked in committee about that foregoing certification puts at risk that it could be, and I'm not discounting that at all. But I just want to be careful for the public that the proposal doesn't mean doing less. The proposal is not doing the certification, which does open up some windows of possibility, but not necessarily asking to do less.
I mean, in terms of what the memo says, though, it says, looking at first page of 7B. It says, to highlight the differences in the process, the red highlighted boxes have been included for items on the LEAD BD plus C credit summary sheet checklist that will not be included if formal submission is not required. They're suggested for elimination because there are procedural requirements for documentation and submission, or because they will not apply to the proposed new physical plant building or CTC renovation. So they may or may not really be relevant. Although there were some pieces in there that when I was looking through, I was like, well, maybe like bike storage might still be relevant, but I don't want to quibble on those. But then it says the remaining items on the list will be reviewed, considered, and implemented in the proposed design as determined by the design team's established goals for the level of presumed LEED certification. And I guess at that point, like, it's not clear to me where the accountability is to the public and the board in the process for the items on that list. Does that question make sense?
Sure. And Peter, step in if I. So we don't do every single thing. Everybody doesn't do every single.
No,
so
you
it's a
decide
point
where you're going to
structure,
put your.
You kind of you take your building and your siting. And you say, okay, what are our owner's project requirements for this building?
Right.
What do we hope to accomplish? And then we go and we look at the LEED standards and the checklist and say, okay, we want to incorporate these 12 things, and these 3 or 4 things don't apply. These 3 or 4 things we don't feel as that would have as big of a benefit, right, for that building, right? And it's
for the
a pointing
return on
system,
investment,
right?
yeah.
So we would still keep all those checklists, right, and track all of the items that we would use. And in the beginning, the checklist talks about a large document, owner project requirements. It's an integrated process to develop those owner project requirements. We have, for this building in particular, we have 1 tenant facilities.
Yep.
So we've already gone through kind of that integrated process with our staff because we know, just to get feedback. So like I said, it's a once we have guidance here and say, okay, this is how we're going to move forward with regard to LEED. We would then sit down and kind of go through this checklist and start with the plan to say, here are the things we're going to tackle and get those in that owner's project requirements.
So how do you ensure that you as like the LEED representative from the district and us as the board, as the owner, without that third-party verification, how do we ensure that we're getting what we're paying for from the design team and the builder?
So it would be on physical plant to monitor the
Right.
process, right? And utilize the resources that we have at hand, and our integrated design team to make sure that these things happen.
Because the architect will still be responsible for all of the various sign-offs and verifications as we go through the process. Just
Sure.
And wouldn't that be the case on any renovation?
But
Sure.
if we're doing the LEED certification process, we have a third party with this expertise that is double checking the work of the architect, the project manager, the builders, to ensure that as the owner that we're getting what we paid for from that team.
Sure. So that's what the certification process would be. The Green Council would, so we'd submit all the paperwork, and they would, verify that everything was done. And the onus of that now falls on us.
But the design team, including the architect and physical plant representatives, are not going to do any more or any less, whether we are LEED certified or not. If we're doing LEED certified, then we're paying a third party, as you just described, to do I'm going to call a triple check. Is that kind of a layman's description? And so that third party then, that, in my world, that's considered a premium, because we're still getting the same product.
I will say, to me as an individual, I feel like this is similar to the decision on hiring a project manager to help with things like cost estimating, where that costs money, but what you're paying for is ensuring that you have another party that's verifying that we as the owner, the district as the owner, is getting what we're paying for from the design team.
I agree with you. Yeah. And we're not suggesting that we need a project manager, because we're not doing 5 different buildings at one time, and the scope of these 2 projects are much smaller.
But I think I think that's a different decision point. But like in terms of, I guess where my concern comes with this is that this is a large enough amount of taxpayer dollars in total that without having, that I get a little concerned that, like, okay, we're saying we will be building to this standard, but without, and it's not that I don't trust Mike and you and your office, it's that for you to have someone who's a third party, whose fiduciary responsibility is to you and to us, is different than the architect or a project manager or the builder. Do you know what I mean?
I do. I completely get it.
And it's
we're
not
talking about a premium to get a plaque.
It's an audit, not a plaque.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Right.
We're talking about an audit to verify that work is done, and we're already getting a second audit, as it would be. And we really don't care. We're bringing it forward.
Yes.
We're not being adversarial.
I know. I'm not trying to be either. I'm just
I don't think that you are. I'm just making sure that it's understood we're not. We just again, it is taxpayer dollars, and we're trying to be as fiscally responsible as we can when an option to not do this still should land us with the same high performing building.
Peter?
Yeah, well, and I think Laurel had her hand up before I did, and so if Laurel wants to go, and then
I just have
I'll
a
go.
quick question. How separable are these projects? So could we, given the time issue and the student issue, could we proceed with that
They're
part?
2 separate different projects.
Okay, so they're 2 separate decisions. Okay,
100%.
I just I thought so. I wanted to make sure. Thank you.
So I guess my reading from the policy, from my own experience with LEED, and I'll be going for the LEED LEED certification myself this year. So I can't speak as an actual LEED AP, right? I have to sit for the exam. But I think that it would be a reversal on a decision that's been there for 14 years, that has precedent. 5 buildings have exceeded the standard now, so that's one thing. I think that the district, I know that the district is seen as a leader in this space, and that among some, and maybe it's just some small group of people, it would be viewed as backsliding. I don't think that, I don't want to do that. Even if, like, do all the things and, but the lack of that certification and the transparency and the accountability, the premium associated with it, I think that is certainly worth it. And that in the worst case scenario, and maybe I'm more sensitive to this than other members of the board, is that people would say, oh, you're greenwashing. You say that you're going to do all these things, and then the board doesn't do it, and that's also not something that I'm really very interested in. Mostly, I think that that all of the things that are associated, the time and the patience and the care that can be done through LEED to make sure that the building performs absolutely as well as it can, that's the most important thing that'll come out of it, is the actual performance of the building that works for our district. And that would be the last thing I say about it.
Maybe it would help if I maybe explain the process a little more. So currently our engineering team consists of HLA for our architect, and then we have Reese Hackman and Stahl Schaefer, kind of like they work with a team to create this entire engineering team, and it's Reese Hackman that really has the members on staff that have the expertise and the certification. So if they could swing the workload, then we would try to utilize them to try to keep some costs down from a third party, but they would also be doing some of the design as far as the HVAC and electrical, right? So it would be up to us. So no matter which way we go, we have a design team that will all have input to this building, and then from the LEED standpoint, if we do not go with certification, it would be up to both HLA to help us out verifying materials of construction, those types of things, and then as well as myself acting as construction manager to also verify as well. So this type of project, we would not, small enough, we would not try to hire a third-party CM firm. We could do it in-house. So that's kind of the process, and we would. So you made a comment, Peter, about the lack of transparency. I'm not really sure where that comes in, because I feel like we can be very transparent with the process, and and explain and report out everything that we've done that meets the guidelines of the LEED process. So I don't foresee a lack of transparency. I'll be honest.
Because you'd still be filling out the
Sure, we would still be very transparent with the entire process and let everybody know kind of what exactly we're doing, what points we're going after, and then have all of that verified, validated, and documented.
Do you want to get people who were at the committee?
Yeah, I mean, anybody's welcome to raise their hand.
Well, I just want to follow on briefly, without taking too much time, follow on Amy's comment, and I was really appreciative of her bringing forward the needs of those individual students and the needs of the students in that program. And the fact that from a leadership environment approach to things, and not just on the legal side, but also on the humane side, the sooner we can find an alternative setting for those students, the better. And I mean, in an ideal world, it would happen through some kind of renovation of a facility that into which we can have those students be educated. But it might be something we rent, which we can get out of this perhaps mindset we're in, that it has to be in Fairmont where we house that particular program. We used to rent spaces for those students in settings that were far less depressing, to put it simply. So I think it's possible for us to find options in this that may open the door for extending the length of this project that but also provides for the needs of these students. It may cost us more because the rent will cost us more, but will get us out of that reliance on Fairmont, because it was never intended for those students to be housed in Fairmont to begin with. There was supposed to be some option on the North Campus that was supposed to be available for those students, but it kind of got lost.
And that program used to be housed in a rental.
Right. For years. I mean, it was
office space that the school district rented.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Yep. Yeah.
One thing that came up at the committee meeting, I think it's just important to note that the resolution passed in 2008 actually puts monetary guidelines on which buildings are LEED and which are not. So just with inflationary measures, maybe that's something that is looked at some point as well. And maybe it's lowered. I don't know. I'm just saying there's a monetary aspect to that resolution that may want to be revisited at some point.
Yeah, it was $1 million, anything over $1 million renovation. Which, I mean,
And
just
that-
adding our classrooms at Mountain NEL was just under half of that. I forget
Right.
what the total was. for
But that wasn't substantial renovation of a building?
Right, well, the
Res-
resolution qualifies what considered to be substantial based on a dollar
Yeah,
figure.
based on a dollar figure or square footage of 5,000 square
Yeah, it's
feet,
either
or
or,
25% of
not all.
replacement value of the building.
Gretchen?
Yeah, so I'm on the facilities committee, but I was unable to attend that meeting, so I thought I'd chime in after having listened to everybody's points, and I read the notes from the meeting, which was really helpful. And I have just a couple points I wanted to communicate, to chime in here. One is that the title of LEED certification is a physical and psychological representation of what our community values. It reminds me a lot of when I first got on the board 7 years ago now, Dan pointed out, when we were voting on the materials that the high school and the Delta building would be made of, particularly the facade, so what people are driving past every single day and what the kids and the teachers and the staff are seeing every single day. And I have not been quoted much in my 7 years on the board because that's just how it's been, but I actually was quoted because I talked about how that is a physical representation that our community values education. And I think that this is analogous in that this is and I would say here, not just a physical representation, but again, also a psychological representation that not only that our community values prioritizing sustainability and the future, but also K through 12 students, because that is the future, but also that the current adults making these decisions, if you're an elementary school student, the grown-ups, so you put yourself in that lens, that, and the leaders, which that's us because we're elected leaders here, that we prioritize sustainability and their future, what they're going to be dealing with later. And so, again, it's not just the physical, it's also the psychological representation that I think so I guess I'm trying to say that for some people, it's not just an audit. And for some people it is, and I think I've been to those CAC meetings, and for some of those CAC members, it is. And so I guess I'm just trying to communicate a different perspective and understanding of what that LEED certification means, because it depends, I guess, on who you talk to. And then the point about the third-party verification, it's my understanding that the third-party verification of having it LEED certified is exactly the whole point. I mean, that's what gives the LEED title any meaning, right? And so to just do away with it and say, well, it would be LEED certified if we did it, but it didn't have the third-party verification, which is the whole point of LEED. And so that part has me tripped up, just, I guess, cognitively. And also, I've had in the back of my mind after listening to everybody, and Peter probably knows more than I do, but the authors of LEED, or the folks who created the entire process of LEED, if they were to look at the memo that I was looking at earlier with all the red pointing out, well, we're going to pick and choose which parts of the LEED certification process we're going to say has value in these projects and which don't. You know, would they agree that it's the equivalent of silver LEED? I don't know. I don't know if they would or not, but to just assume that it's the equivalent, but yet you're picking and choosing, to me, that doesn't compute as the equivalent. So that's another question that I've had in my mind throughout listening to everybody. And then one last thought is that it seems like this just feels really rushed. And, well, we have to do it so that, you know, the 2 months. I don't think that 2 months, considering how long most things take in public education and the school district and the other buildings, the other facilities that I've been a part of in the past 7 years, 2 months is nothing. So that argument kind of falls flat with me. The equity issue falls flat with me because it's just a matter of 2 months. So I'm not seeing how that's really valid. And then the thing that this whole speedy process thing, it seems like a lot of it isn't necessarily the 2% cost premium. It's really the speed of this 2 months, and let's get this done in these 2 months faster. And what kind of is, I guess, a shame or sad, or perhaps one could argue not justified, is that it sort of got not postponed, but the process slowed down because the previous superintendent left. And so it would just be sort of sad to think, well, because the superintendent left, we're going to forfeit the LEED certification process. And then the community loses out. The sort of teaching aspect of it or curriculum aspect of it, of kids looking and saying, oh, these buildings, all the buildings from the resolution, which I didn't even talk about, but is it worth defying the resolution for 2 months? And that message that it sends to K through 12 students and our community. And it would just be sad that because the previous superintendent left, we're giving up a lot on these projects. If we go this route of picking and choosing and then saying, well, it's the equivalent of LEED, but we're not going to do LEED. So anyway, I think those were all the points I wanted to make. So anyway, because I wasn't able to be there for the facilities meeting, I probably took a little bit more time. So hopefully everybody's understanding about that.
So we'll go either way. We're just asking for clarification from the board of which direction you want to do. And just being physical responsible and showing you both options. Okay, so that's all we're asking for this board.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I know Randy's brought us many decisions that are, you know, where it's like you have these options and give us direction.
So this didn't necessarily get delayed. It's just when we actually had time to get to the process, and to the you know, and as far as the points and that checklist, that's I think that it's very similar to what occurred in all of our other building projects. That we looked at things that had viable payoffs for us, given our site location and our desires as a district and things. So I'm not sure that this is going down a different path. And, you know, there's not a lot of people left around the district that went through that process. I'm kind of it from that level. And I wasn't involved, you know, as much as I am this time in these smaller projects. But as Curtis said, you know, we don't need to belabor this. I think from what Laurel said, there are people in the community that don't necessarily value this in the same way that many of you in this room do, and that can be said for a lot of different things. And you know, everything. It's done.
Yeah, I will say, when we're talking about like the fiscal responsibility aspect of it, to me, that's one of the reasons that I would say we need to move forward with the LEED certification, because these are still, many millions of dollars worth of projects, to which I feel like we should spend the money to get the third-party verification that we're getting the high-performing systems that we believe we're paying for. That's my perspective on the fiscal responsibility, because as a proportion of the project, it's an audit and a bit of insurance, I guess. So, and it doesn't reflect on you. It's more that I'm not an architect, and none of us in this room are. So, or an engineer. So, Laurel.
I really feel there's a difference between the two projects. And even when we talked at the Finance CAC meeting, those comments were largely about, we really didn't talk that much about the CTC piece, the North Building. When we've got our high school as a whole LEED certified, to have this little island of it not, I think is very different than, I think we should still have a discussion about the other building, but for the North Building part, I know it's all one campus, but for the building part itself, I think we really need to keep them at the same level, including the audit or the certification or that part. And just to clarify that I think and Randy may have seen it differently, but my sense was that at the committee meeting, when I talked about that earlier, we really were focusing on the physical plant building. So.
Okay. All right. But you don't know, did you want a decision from us tonight? Sorry, I'll let Jackie go.
It's just a discussion, right?
Yes, that's what I thought.
All right, just so that I'm not the only person who didn't say anything at the board table on this subject. I just want to say, I need time. I'm gonna need more time to think about this, but I really appreciate all the points everyone's made. When I think about the function of a school and what its core function is, I'm not sure if the teachers walking into that school and the students walking into that school are going to have a huge benefit from having a LEED plaque on it or not. That being said, I do understand the argument that third-party certification can be really important. And I also want to say, I hear you saying that you will act in good faith if we decide not to go with the LEED certification to still make a high-functioning building, and I really appreciate that, and I would trust you guys to do that. And I just want to make sure I say that. So with that, I will stop because it's 9:38.
We don't need a decision tonight.
Okay.
What we would like to have is, a motion or an action item for October 3rd. And obviously it's your practice as well as our practice to present a motion that is going to not necessarily need to be edited at the table.
One for each project, because I
Yes.
think
Oh,
that
yes,
might-
absolutely. Yeah,
Yes.
I think that's
Okay.
important.
But I guess I would
Yeah.
also like to know which way to word it so that
I don't think we're gonna know.
Gonna get that tonight.
then we'll just put it out there as an either or and you can fill in the blanks.
Okay.
It's not like it hasn't happened before.
Right.
We've done that way before.
And I'll repeat myself, I wouldn't want the needs of the students in that particular program to have a role in this one way or the other. We can simply find another home for them temporarily that is away from Fairmount, that could be free us up in terms of feeling bound to provide a space for them within a certain time frame. We can simply provide an alternative, literally a placement, which was, as Amber mentioned earlier, was a previous practice. We go back to that temporarily and provide a space for those students to be educated, and then give ourselves the freedom to be able to accomplish whatever the board feels is necessary to accomplish the certifications that we think are necessary.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so moving on then to board committee reports. Laurel, can you do the culture, climate, and learning report? Culture, climate, and learning, that you had chaired that meeting. Oh, thanks. I should have asked you before, but.
Nope, I can, thank you. We had a robust meeting. There was a lot on the agenda. We have dealt with a lot of it today. We talked quite a bit about the SRO function, what they do. We had our high school SRO there, as well as a representative from the State College Police Department, and they talked some. And there was significant public comment as well. And we've talked about that today. I did make notes for myself, sorry. We talked in greater detail about the item that we added to the art curriculum today, which was the mindfulness class, as well as about the math research. In addition, we talked about what happens with library books, how they're reviewed, and we actually have a fairly model, since that's not an action item, I just want to mention that we have a very, very high standard and a very well-regarded policy of how we deal with that and procedures for dealing with that. And there was one, we postponed because of timeliness. We decided that we would talk about the surveys at this coming meeting. And I think that was all that I had. Have I forgotten anything, those of you who were there?
Nope.
Okay.
Thanks, Laurel.
Thank you. Debbie and Peter, could you give the F&G and finance?
Sure. I mean, I can probably do the whole thing because I think we've talked about all the facilities and ground stuff already.
Yep.
As far as finance, we briefly discussed extra duty, extra pay for hourly employees. Generally, extra duty, extra pay is a stipend. We've avoided paying that to hourly employees in the past because you're not allowed to. But we're trying to figure out a way to make that happen so that we can increase our pool of individuals who would be able to fulfill those roles. So that was something that was talked about. We were just told, I guess we didn't really talk about, more athletic sponsorships are coming down the road. So Lauren Crispel is working on some of that. We've been working on a foundation sponsorship proposal looking at smaller donations for naming opportunities, thinking about things like benches on the high school campus. So that was something that should be coming to the board soon. And then I think everything else, other than the climate action resolution, was discussed, but not really in any more detail than it had been in the past. Everything else was already discussed on the agenda tonight. Thanks.
Okay, so looking forward to upcoming meetings. The September 21st communications meeting will just be postponed until the next time that's supposed to meet. Is that going to be an October meeting then? Okay.
I believe it's actually November.
November, you're right.
Because of people out of town.
All right. Then looking at culture, climate, and learning, that has a meeting not this Tuesday, but next Tuesday at 10:30 in the morning here. Seems like we already did a central intermediate unit report, right? Can we just skip that?
And then yes.
Okay. The SCASD Ed Foundation liaison report, let me delay that till the next meeting just because of the time of evening it is right now. And because we did review a lot of what they're doing in the finance meeting, and that's in the minutes from the finance meeting as well. So it'll be more substantive next month. CTC Local Advisory Committee, Carlene.
We have meetings coming up. So we don't have a meeting yet. But we have meetings coming up, both for the CTC and also for the CAC Athletics.
Yes. And I think did we give the report for CAC for athletics at the last meeting? And we haven't, they meet again tomorrow night.
Correct.
Yep. And then for facilities, has there been a CAC for facilities meeting since our last report on it? I don't think there has been, right? Finance? Okay, that's what I was thinking. Laurel, can you give the finance update?
Can you put your mic on? That's okay.
Yes, we discussed the building projects that we were just talking about. We also talked at some length not only about the foundation, the proposal in terms of benches and all that was made, but in general about fundraising in the district and opportunities for people to have naming opportunities. So that was also a fairly significant discussion.
Okay, great. School health and safety, Dan, was there a meeting?
We've yet to have a
Okay.
meeting.
Jackie, technology?
Nothing to report.
Okay. So looking forward to future agenda planning. Our next regular meeting is October 3rd. So we would be bringing, well, there's a number of items that we talked about that will be coming back for that. And just a reminder that on September 27th, we have a work session.
The future agenda planning on the agenda says the next meeting is 10/13.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's the 3rd.
Just wanted to point it out, that's all.
Okay.
I'll fix that.
Great. Okay. With that, could we have a motion to adjourn to executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor of adjourning? Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay. All right, then we are adjourned.
You're watching CNET, Center County's Government and Educational Access Network.